Hey, all right. Video 2, understanding hypertrophy from a training aspect. Okay. Not, nutrition obviously has a lot to do with it, but the training aspect. A lot of people, like I said, early studies, um, early studies that were done on hypertrophy. Let's go with this. Early studies that were done on hypertrophy, they would look into the first few hours of after training, and what would you see then? You would see the damage from a mechanical load being repaired. This is where we have these satellite cells between a layer and the muscle belly that have basically what's makings of stem cells, and it's been shown that MGF, growth factor created in the body from the growth hormone, postglandins, whatever is produced, it actually has to do with that aspect. It's the mechanical growth factor, and it actually has to do with repairing damage from a mechanical load. At that point, after the mechanical load is fixed, that's when the hypertrophy can begin. So, but at first glance, years ago, it looked like that would be what was causing the hypertrophy. But we've talked about the fact that you lower myostatin. Animals, for example, that they have genetically bred to not have myostatin, the muscle just keeps growing. There's nothing they can do about it. They look like just these huge genetic freaks with no body fat. Their metabolic rate must be ridiculous. We lower myostatin through our training and our hormonal response. Okay, that has a lot to do with the pump. Even it's been shown, but and growth hormone creates myoblasts and things like that. The thing is, the more we know, the more we're learning we don't know, because you have all this and all this and all this and all this to look into deeper. But we do know now that just more weight and tearing the muscles down is not what directly causes the hypertrophy. It is the stimulus hormonally that tells your body to put more muscle on. So you want to stimulate, and from there, don't do too much mechanical damage. You're never going to get away from some, because anytime you're using a resistance load, some micro tearing or damage will happen. But we want to find ways to keep that as low as possible and max hypertrophy. We don't want to beat ourselves into a pulp. We don't want our joints to be shot. We don't want so much scar tissue in the muscles and tears and shit that it won't develop right anymore. We want healthy, just healthy, full muscles that can continually grow. And you'll see a lot of guys in time that train too heavy and things like that. They have so many imbalances. They get on stage and they look like shit. And I suffer from things when I was younger and didn't know any better. I believe that shit too, because that's what we were told. I still hear guys come to the gym. It's just about tearing them down. Quit watching Machiavelli motivational videos. That's a crock of shit. Okay, this is about science. All right. Now, if you look at guys like, let's say, Nick Walker, everybody's raving about him. Nick Walker obviously has a team of people behind him that are he's not, no 25-year-old kid knows that much. He's got people helping him that have been like guys like Emmerich Delzig or like Phil, for example, or even myself. Like, they can instill things into this kid and help him, go to that level. So that's where other than, actual deep studies, I reach out to, Phil was a huge thing in my life. George Farah helped me some, Justin Harris some, but then, Phil, Emmerich Delzig, and John Jaguish is, that guy's The guy, he broke the code. I understand why he doesn't talk online as much, because there's too many pig-headed guys that get their ego hurt from being proven wrong, and they attack him. But the thing is, it's a fact, okay? And he just keeps going and proving himself right, and eventually, right now, the whole NFL and everything's switching over to his style of training. It's coming. We're just ahead of the curve. So, the hypertrophy, the better hormonal output we get, the more hypertrophy we create. There's all kinds of aspects through training, but a lot of this training was always, obviously with just weight loads. But as we can tell, like a sprinter, for example, they can get some pretty awesome quads on them just running really hard because of the force that they're putting into that muscle. The muscle doesn't know how much it's lifting, it just knows how hard it's working. So it's being told it needs to get bigger in order to handle that, because your body's lazy. It just wants to get to the point where it doesn't have to try. So it keeps trying to have to not try, basically. And our frontal cortex has to find ways to constantly keep it trying. Okay, that's bodybuilding. So bodybuilding isn't about ego, and I did 20 sets with this weight. That's great. You're really strong, cool. Bodybuilding is about developing the body. It's about art. So let's go to a science aspect of it. We want to do as little damage as possible with maximum hypertrophy. So obviously with training, you got things like intensity, volume, effort, reps, length of rest periods, tension, tempo, the pump. There's things like drop sets. Why do these all work? This is where Phil was very smart too. From early on, Phil would look and he'd say, well, high intensity, like higher volume guys are doing this, and this is guys doing this, and this is whatever. But what are they all doing wrong? This is all garbage. This is all just overtraining. So let's take these aspects and come up with some stuff. And there's not one way to go about it, but we always are searching for the better way. With time, if we don't be so pig-headed and listen to each other and things like that, we find better ways. So drop the ego and we get better. We get an ego through our results, not through how bad we can beat the shit out of ourselves and acting like we know everything. Now, on an aspect of training, obviously we got muscle fiber recruitment. That's one thing where Emmerich Delzig was very intelligent back in his day. They didn't have like the bands to put more tension into the contraction. So let me break it down for some people. There are certain aspects where the eccentric load recruits the most fibers, and that's the most important thing to pay attention to if you're using weight against gravity. So let's think of things like bench press or squat. We're getting into the max stretch position, but the load gets greater because you got a weight against gravity on the muscle. And as that muscle, your brain senses that and recruits more fibers to handle that, okay? But we come out of the stretched position, we are limited to how much weight we can use. This is where Emmerich was intelligent, and he would have a couple spotters put a bunch of weight on. You would come into the stretched position with that weight, but you want to work through the full range of motion. That is proven, the full range of motion and max effort and muscle fiber recruitment. Then you have the hormonal response to all this training is what's important. So you get all those fibers recruited, and then the guys would pull the weight off, and you could then get the weight up without doing the damage to the joints. This is where you tear fibers, rip things, fuck your joints up, stuff like that. Took that out of the equation. He's 70 years old, still doing this shit. He ain't 35, 40 years old and fucked hip replacement surgery and shoulders screwed and whatever because he was smart. Okay, Emmerich worked for Balco Labs. Emmerich latched onto even Phil because they related a lot. Phil was smart. Phil was supposed to be groomed into being Mr. Olympia. Joe Weider paid him $40,000 to do the Olympia. If he didn't have the legal problems he had, he probably would have been. And he did it himself by paying attention to what worked, what didn't. His diet was revolutionary. His training was different. Phil was very intelligent, okay? Now, so people can say all they want about him. I knew Phil on a personal basis. Nicest guy in the world and massively smart. And no, the guys that are accusing him of just drug use, that's just the fact they don't understand the training of max stimulus with the least effort, and that's what Phil put everything into. Because now back to the recruitment. Let's say then you have the contraction, and then they load it again and come down. I've tried this style of training and it works. Let's say just theoretically you could bench 225 full range of motion 10 times. Okay? Put the ego aside, you're going to max stretch and you're going to contract. The thing with the weight though is, there's a point where you could throw it. So that isn't going to create more muscle fiber recruitment. And then you get to the top, you try to create a contraction by keeping load on the muscle. He puts more weight on. Then you bring it down and they pull those weights off. What you could then get 10 with, because you're recruiting all these fibers and then recruit. Your body thinks it's got to push. Let's say you put 350 pounds on there. It thinks it needs to push 350. Your brain senses that, recruits all these fibers. It turns into 225 and all of a sudden, whoop, So like in things like the squat or the bench press or things like that, this was super effective, okay? In things like the bicep curl, it's not. People would say then, it seems like contraction grows the bicep more, okay? No, it's a muscle. It's because you had more, as you get in the stretch position, the weight's just fucking hanging there. You're not recruiting anything. But if you do it right with gravity and don't just try to swing it and build your ego and actually put as much effort into that as you want, you have to manipulate your body against gravity and do all these squeezes. But then you're recruiting max fibers into the contraction, and plus you're getting max contraction and load and creating a better pump from squeezing all that blood out of there. The pump has been shown to lower myostatin, and it creates the environment for the new muscle to come up. So the pump's important. If you studied it directly at the initial time, the pump doesn't look as important. But down the road, with all these other growth factors doing their thing after it's been stimulated, it actually plays a huge role in everything. So from there, that's where the bands come into play, because like a pressing movement, for example. Now, the pressing movement with like some sort of a load with a band, I can get max stretch every time. I do the push-ups and the rings with a band. You get max stretch, but the load grows into the contraction to the point you can make it where you can't even get the rep fully out there. That muscle it's maxed out, okay? And you got the stabilization going on. That hormonal response is going crazy. What you do is sensitize the muscle receptors in the muscles, and all these hormones and postglandulins and everything you're creating then cause that hypertrophy over like a couple day period. That can't even begin until the mechanical damage is done. So if you do too much mechanical damage, it gets to the point where the hypertrophy can't even happen. That's where the overtraining comes in. So then even with balance, I've proven with the single leg Bosu ball squats, again, the muscle has no idea how much weight you're using, okay? It just knows how hard it's working. So you're balancing there and all these muscles are getting pulled into it. Your CNS is going crazy. Your body goes, I need to adapt to this. And you start creating this environment, okay? All that goes into that. Now, you try to control it down. You make every rep as hard on yourself as humanly possible. Somebody that just thinks, 10 reps, bam, 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 and just, did 10 reps, good. No, that you don't understand it. You want to make yourself fail Reps don't fucking matter at a point. They do matter to some point, but really not, okay? We can get into that down the road. But I come down to the bottom and I'm balancing, those muscles are tensing up. You're recruiting all these fibers, and then you from there have to push that load up, okay? And everything's in a safer position, and then what you can do is add a band when needed to bring low, more tension into the contraction if need be. But I'm actually finding points with now I'm able to create stimulus even without the bands yet, because I'm getting better and better at the single leg squat. So it is how hard the muscle is working that creates this. And eventually we will have to use mechanical load, but get every fucking ounce of muscle you can out of the load you're using before you go up. Like, people don't understand all those aspects. They're just trying to throw more and more weight on. You see these guys doing half-ass bicep curls and that sort of thing. And I've just started ignoring it and quit trying to help everybody, because, it's just not worth all the effort, and my ADHD goes crazy. So from there, we talk about volume and frequency. So, a certain amount of volume per week's important, and guys didn't understand it completely back in the day, but like with the bro split, where you would do, the chest and back and legs, eventually that'll work at first just because you're doing from nothing to something. But eventually your body gets better at recovering faster, and you can only handle so much volume at once. And after a couple days, the muscle is no longer building, it actually will start to break down. Because at rest, your body's always breaking down and recovering, and if we are inactive, the breakdown will start to happen faster than the recovery. And hypertrophy is when the muscle protein synthesis is higher than the breakdown. Okay, so we always don't want to break down too much. So less damage, more hypertrophy. All right. You're always going to have some, damage and whatnot, but get as much stimulation as you can with least damage. That's why I like, the bands added to everything. That's why everybody's starting to add them to everything. And that's why the NFL is going to all band and balance training. That's scientifically, they're at the, they're the people training them are at the top of the fields, and they're John's a fucking genius. Everybody can say what they want about him, but he's right about a lot of stuff. Now, so that's where, a lot of the, let's say, performance enhancers, things like that, like anabolics, for example, were first brought into the scene a lot for like muscle wasting diseases, where people's protein would break down faster than it would recover, and they would give them these things, and then it their body will then be able to have better protein synthesis and lower cortisol, and it doesn't break down as fast. So that's where, if you don't change the frequency and keep going up with volume, you're doing so much volume your body normally can't recover to it, and then you're not training the muscle again for 6 days. That's ridiculous. Okay, that's where you have to start training more frequently. And then frequently, you still have a certain amount of volume that you can only handle in a week. Okay, and with that, the more frequency, the more times you're stimulating these hormones and creating myoblasts, keeping the myostatin down, pushing fresh blood nutrients into the muscles. So think about it. The more times we can recover, or we can train and recover and train again, the faster we will hypertrophy. There's time, the guys have proven it, where you could train a muscle in the morning one set, train a muscle at night one set, enough where you can recover each time and they grow. Okay, so now let's take max advantage of that, and then everybody eventually, a lot of guys go to 2 days a week, which is a lot better. 3 days a week better, but a lot of guys are stuck on that 3 sets shit. That was a study done so long ago, and they put, like, it only takes 1 to 3 sets in order to push a muscle to have to get bigger. that's where guys would misunderstand it. Like 3 sets of 10, 3 sets of 10, 3 sets of 10. No, you could do 1 set. And if you are training through full range of motion, max contraction, and fiber recruitment, and burning every ounce of oxygen and energy out of those fibers to the very last one and telling that muscle to develop, that 1 set was it. Anything from there, you're prematurely wearing out your body and delaying recovery. Okay? So when we understand this, it starts to make sense. Okay? When you get done with a set, you think, could I get more? No. If you do another set and you only get half as many reps, that thing was a waste of your time. It was. Unless you start using more and more drugs. Let's get max performance out of everything we can and lessen, and use as little enhancers as we can, stay healthy and be really good bodybuilders to the end. I have no problem with the hormone use, but let's keep our head to into it. And then, so you could do then the frequency of training every day, and we've proven that. I train every muscle every day a lot, minimally every other. I've tried it multiple times a day. My volume got too heavy and I got some overtraining, but that's easy to recover from. You just rest and eat good for a little bit and then come back with a level head. But you can't recover from damaging your joints, tearing muscles, things like that. So just thinking more and more and more weight, it's not it. That's where you're gonna screw yourself up. Okay. We can touch more on this stuff down the road. I guess I'll cut her off here. The video's starting to get a little long. And, I appreciate everybody paying attention to this that cares. I hope you got something out of it. And in a few days, I'll come in with some other stuff that we can touch on this for like a third video to understand this stuff a little more. All right? Have a good Sunday. Bye.